I found my fiancé holding his secret baby on our wedding day, the morning I was supposed to marry Daniel Cole. I found him on a private jet with my sister curled against his shoulder and a crying baby in his arms. The baby had Daniel's gray eyes, and Daniel's last name was printed on the hospital bracelet. I stood in the aisle wearing my wedding dress, while the 3 people in front of me stared back like I had entered the wrong plane. For one terrible second, I actually wondered if I had. Then my sister Rachel pulled away from Daniel so quickly that her champagne glass tipped over. Daniel rose from his seat, still holding the baby, and said my name in the calm voice he always used when he was about to lie. I did not scream. I did not cry. I looked at the bracelet again and quietly asked why Rachel's baby had his last name. Daniel glanced down. Rachel covered the bracelet with her hand. That tiny movement told me more than any confession could have. 6 months earlier, Rachel had announced that she was pregnant after a brief relationship with a man she refused to name. She said he was married and wanted nothing to do with the child. I had paid her rent, bought the crib, and sat beside her through every doctor's appointment. Daniel claimed he was too busy to attend with me. I had believed I was protecting my younger sister. In reality, I had been helping my fiancé prepare for the birth of their son. Daniel finally said the hospital had made a paperwork mistake. According to him, Rachel had been exhausted. He had helped with the forms, and someone had entered his information in the wrong place. It was a terrible explanation, but Rachel immediately nodded. Then Daniel made an even worse mistake. He kissed the baby's forehead without thinking. It was not the polite kiss of a family friend. It was familiar and automatic. It was the kiss of a father who had done it 100 times when no one was watching. My heart felt as if it had split open, but another part of me became strangely calm. I asked why they were on the jet that was supposed to take Daniel and me from Los Angeles to our wedding in Napa. Rachel said she had panicked about flying alone with a newborn. Daniel said he had offered to help. They claimed Rachel would get off in San Francisco before we continued to Napa. I looked at the luggage behind them. Daniel's black suitcase stood beside Rachel's red one. Both had matching tags for Cabo San Lucas. Our honeymoon was supposed to be in Paris. Daniel saw me reading the tags and stepped into the aisle. He said the luggage company must have reused old labels. He reached for my hand, but I moved past him and sat across from Rachel. I told them I believed them. Rachel's mouth fell open. Daniel looked relieved for half a second before suspicion returned to his face. I smiled and said the wedding had already cost nearly $200,000. Our guests were waiting. Whatever this misunderstanding was, we could settle it after the ceremony. Daniel studied me, searching for a trap. At that moment, I had no trap. I had only shock, a shaking stomach, and one clear instinct. If I accused them too soon, they would destroy the evidence. So I sat in my wedding dress and let the plane take off. 10 minutes later, Daniel handed me a glass of champagne. I pretended to drink while he explained that Rachel had been emotional since giving birth. Rachel stared through the window and said nothing. The baby began crying again. Daniel knew exactly how to hold him. He supported the baby's neck, walked slowly, and hummed under his breath. It was the same song Daniel used to hum while cooking dinner for me. I excused myself and went to the small bathroom at the back of the plane. Once the door was locked, I pressed a towel over my mouth and let myself cry for exactly 1 minute. Then I washed my face and called Nora, the attorney for my family's hotel company. I could not explain everything, so I gave her one sentence. I told her not to file any document carrying my signature, even if Daniel delivered it himself. She went silent. Then she asked whether I was safe. That question frightened me more than the affair. For the last year, Daniel had been pushing me to sign what he called a simple marital protection agreement. My mother had left me 60% of Bellwether Hotels, a small but valuable chain she had built from one roadside inn in Arizona. Daniel was the company's chief financial officer. Under his proposed agreement, he would receive temporary voting authority over my shares if I became sick or unavailable. He said it was practical. Nora had said it was dangerous. I had planned to sign it after the wedding because I trusted the man I was marrying. Now Daniel was sitting outside the bathroom with a secret child and 2 suitcases tagged for Mexico. When I returned to my seat, Daniel's tablet was lying beside me. The screen lit up as the plane connected to Wi-Fi. A message appeared from Rachel. She was sitting 6 feet away, but she had texted him anyway. Her message said, "Does she know?" Another message appeared before Daniel could reach the tablet. "She cannot sign angry." Daniel grabbed the tablet and locked the screen. I looked at him as if I had noticed nothing. Inside, my fear changed shape. This was not only an affair. They needed my signature, and they needed it that day. The plane landed in San Francisco because I suddenly claimed I felt too sick to continue. Daniel argued that the Napa ceremony would start in 3 hours. I leaned into him, lowered my voice, and said I was pregnant. It was a lie, but it worked. All the color left his face. Rachel looked at him, and the hatred in her eyes was so sharp that I knew she had believed he would eventually leave me. I said I needed a doctor before the wedding. Daniel agreed at once, because refusing would have made him look cruel. He booked a car and insisted on coming with me. I told him to take Rachel and the baby to the hotel first. I promised I would meet him there. The moment their car left, Nora pulled up with our head of security and a forensic accountant named Mark. I had known Nora since I was 19, but I had never seen her look that angry. She took one look at my dress and hugged me. Then she showed me an email Daniel had sent her office that morning. Attached was the marital agreement, supposedly signed by me. My signature was a forgery. The document did more than give Daniel temporary authority. A hidden amendment allowed him to transfer my voting rights into a trust he controlled. Once the transfer was recorded, removing him could take years of litigation. Nora had delayed filing because the signature looked wrong. My phone call confirmed her suspicion. Mark had already begun checking the company accounts. Within an hour, he found payments to 3 consulting firms that had no employees and no offices. All 3 were controlled by Daniel through an old college friend. More than $4 million had disappeared over 18 months. That explained the private jet. Daniel had told me a hotel investor had loaned it to us as a wedding gift. In fact, he had chartered it with company money. The flight plan after Napa continued to Cabo, where Daniel had rented a villa for 1 month. There were 4 passengers listed for that second flight: Daniel, Rachel, the baby, and me. That last name made no sense until Nora opened another file. Daniel had purchased a $10 million life insurance policy on me 8 weeks earlier. He was the beneficiary. My knees nearly gave out. Nora told me that a policy did not prove he planned to hurt me. She was right. But the forged agreement, the stolen money, the false honeymoon, and the secret insurance policy formed a picture I could no longer ignore. The betrayal had become something darker. I wanted to cancel the wedding and disappear. Nora advised me to do exactly that. But Daniel already knew I had seen too much on the plane. If I ran, he would run too, and $4 million would vanish with him. So I decided to give him the wedding he wanted. For the next 2 hours, I acted like a woman desperate to save her relationship. I called Daniel and said the doctor believed my pain came from stress. I said the pregnancy was very early and asked him not to tell anyone. I apologized for being suspicious of Rachel. He became warm again immediately. He told me he loved me. He told me we would be a family. Then he reminded me to bring the marital agreement. While he spoke, Mark copied the financial records. Nora contacted federal investigators she had worked with on a previous fraud case. Company security changed every password Daniel knew, but they left his email working so he would not realize we were watching. That was when we found the folder named after Emma. Inside were hotel sale documents, wire instructions to an offshore account, and a draft announcement saying I had stepped away from the company for medical reasons. There was also a message chain between Daniel and Rachel. Rachel believed Daniel would marry me, gain control of my shares, and divorce me 6 months later. She believed the two of them would then raise their son together in California. But Daniel had been telling his college friend a different story. Once he had control of the company, he planned to send Rachel and the baby to Mexico with enough money to keep them quiet. He called them a temporary problem. My sister had betrayed me for a man who was already planning to betray her. I sent Rachel one screenshot from an unknown number. It showed Daniel's words clearly. I added only one sentence. Ask him what happens after Emma. At 6 that evening, the music began at the vineyard. I walked down the aisle alone. My mother had died 3 years earlier, and my father had been gone since I was a child. Daniel once told me that made him sad because no one was there to give me away. As I looked at him waiting beneath the white flowers, I finally understood the truth. No one had come to give me away because I did not belong to anyone. Daniel smiled when I reached him. Rachel stood in the front row holding the baby. Her face was pale, and her eyes were swollen from crying. The officiant began. When it was time for the vows, Daniel gave a beautiful speech about trust, loyalty, and building a future together. Then it was my turn. I faced our guests and said I had learned something important that morning. Marriage required honesty, and honesty should begin before the vows. Behind us, the large screen meant for our wedding video came to life. First, it showed the forged agreement, then the false consulting invoices, then the flight plan to Cabo. Finally, it showed Daniel's messages about Rachel and their baby. The vineyard became completely silent. Daniel did not look ashamed. He looked furious. He grabbed my wrist and whispered that I had no idea what I was doing. I pulled free and told him I knew exactly what I was doing. 2 investigators stepped out from among the guests. They were not there to arrest him for cheating. They were there because the morning's financial records supported charges involving wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Daniel turned toward Rachel and told her to fix it. That was his final mistake. Rachel walked forward and handed Nora Daniel's second phone. After receiving my screenshot, she had searched his luggage and found it hidden inside a shoe. The phone contained access codes, account numbers, and voice recordings he had made to protect himself from his partners. Rachel did not help me because she suddenly became a good sister. She helped because she finally understood that Daniel had never loved either of us. The investigators took the phone. Daniel was escorted away while 112 wedding guests watched. I did not marry him. I did not go to Cabo, and I was never pregnant. The case took almost 2 years. Daniel accepted a federal plea deal after the evidence on his second phone connected him to every stolen dollar. Most of the money was recovered before it could leave the country. He received a prison sentence, and the court ordered him to repay the rest. Rachel avoided prison by cooperating, but she lost her job, her apartment, and every friend who had believed her lies. I did not take revenge on her child. The baby was innocent. Through an attorney, I created a small education fund that Rachel could not touch. I have not spoken to my sister since the trial. Some people think that is cruel. They say family should forgive family. But forgiveness does not require an open door. I sold the Los Angeles house where Daniel and I had lived. I kept my mother's company, removed every dishonest executive Daniel had hired, and promoted Mark to chief financial officer. Nora joined our board. 1 year later, I reopened my mother's first roadside inn in Arizona. On opening night, I stood beneath the old neon sign and remembered something she used to tell me. She said a locked door is not always a sign of fear. Sometimes it is proof that the person inside finally understands the value of what she is protecting. Daniel thought my wedding day would give him the key to my life. Instead, it was the day I changed the locks.